Marcus sat on the wooden steps of his old porch as the sun slowly sank behind the distant hills. The sky turned orange and red, like fire spreading across the horizon. He held a cup of coffee in his weathered hands, but it was cold now. He did not drink it. He just held it and stared at nothing. 53 years. That is how long Marcus had been living on this land. His grandfather had built this ranch with his own hands many years before Marcus was born. His father had added more fields and more animals. And Marcus, when he was young and full of dreams, had promised to make the ranch even greater. But life had other plans. The drought had been going on for 3 long years now. 3 years of no rain. 3 years of watching the grass turn brown and dry. 3 years of wells that grew empty and fields that stopped giving anything. The river that once flowed full and strong now barely trickled. Some days Marcus would walk to where the river used to run deep, and he would stand there looking at the dry earth, remembering what it used to look like. His neighbors had left one by one. First, it was Tom Henderson, a good man with 5 children. Then came the Martinez family, then the Johnsons. They all packed their wagons and drove toward the cities, looking for work and water and hope. Marcus did not blame them. He understood, but he could not leave. This land was in his bones. His family was buried here. His wife was buried here. His wife, Sarah. She had died 5 years ago from a sickness that the doctor could not cure. Marcus still remembered the day she left. It was in the morning, when the light came through the window in a soft, gentle way. She was sleeping, and then she was not. Just like that. One moment she was there, and the next moment she was gone forever. He had held her hand for a long time after that. He did not know what else to do. After Sarah died, the house felt too big. Every room reminded him of her. The kitchen where she cooked her famous bread. The porch where they used to sit together in the evening and watch the sunset. The bedroom where they had spent almost 30 years together. Everything was full of memories, and those memories made him cry. So Marcus stopped going inside the house very much. He spent most of his time in the barn with the animals. The animals did not ask questions. They did not expect him to smile or pretend everything was okay. The plantation used to have 300 acres of good, strong land. But after the drought came, Marcus had to sell parts of it just to survive. He sold 100 acres to a big company from the city. The money helped for a while, but it ran out fast. Now he had only 200 acres left, and even those 200 acres were struggling. The grass was brown. The soil was hard like stone. Nothing wanted to grow here anymore. Marcus had only a few animals left now. 5 cows, 3 horses, and some chickens. Years ago, he had 200 cows and many more horses. But he had to sell them or let them go. His heart had broken a little bit each time he sold an animal. But he had to do it to survive. Every morning, Marcus woke up early. Not because he had to, but because sleep was difficult for him. His mind would not stop thinking about Sarah. His mind would not stop thinking about how much money he had left. His mind would not stop thinking about what would happen when even that money was gone. So he got up early and went to the barn. He fed the animals with hay that he had to buy from other places because he could not grow his own hay anymore. He cleaned the barn. He fixed things that were broken. He tried to keep busy so that he would not think. That evening was like many other evenings. Marcus had finished feeding the animals around sunset. The old barn smelled like hay and animal bodies and dust. It was a good smell to Marcus. It reminded him of his whole life. He stood outside the barn, looking at his empty fields, when he noticed something strange. At first, he thought maybe it was a deer or a wild dog. He squinted his eyes to see better. The sun was going down, and the light was getting weak and orange. But as he looked longer, he understood it was not a deer. It was a horse. A horse had never come to his land before. Not a wild horse. Not like this. The horse was black, darker than the night sky. It stood very still at the edge of his property, maybe 200 feet away. Even from that far distance, Marcus could see that the horse looked sick and hurt. Its coat was dirty and covered with dust. Marcus could see its bones through its skin. One of its front legs was not straight. The horse was limping a little bit, favoring one leg over the other. Marcus's first feeling was fear. The ranchers in town had warned him many times about wild horses that came from the north. They said these horses were dangerous and could not be trusted. They said wild horses would hurt you or steal from you or cause trouble. Keep away from them, the old ranchers would say at the feed store. Wild horses are worthless. But Marcus stood very still and watched this horse, and he did not feel fear for very long. What he felt instead was something else, something deeper. The horse looked at him from far away, and Marcus could see something in its eyes. Pain, hunger, loneliness. Marcus understood loneliness very well. He understood what it meant to be hurt and tired and alone. He understood what it felt like when nobody wanted you anymore. He understood what it was like when people said you were worthless and that you should just go away. The wild horse and the old man stood looking at each other in the fading light. Neither one moved. Neither one made a sound. For a long moment, they were just two lonely creatures trying to understand each other across the empty space between them. Marcus did something then that surprised even himself. He turned and walked slowly back to the barn. He was thinking about what the horse might need. A horse that looked this bad, this thin, this hurt, needed one thing more than anything else. It needed food. Marcus moved slowly through the barn, his old knees creaking with each step. He knew exactly where he kept the grain. It was stored in large sacks in the corner, near where the light came through a broken window. He had been saving this grain for his own horses, rationing it carefully because he could not afford to buy more. Times were hard, and every bit of food was precious. He stood in front of the sacks and looked at them for a long moment. He was thinking about his wife again. Sarah would always say, "Marcus, if you see someone in need, you help them. You do not ask questions. You just help." That is who Sarah was. She would give away her last meal to a hungry person. She had a good heart, the kind of heart that could not say no to suffering. Marcus took a large bucket and filled it with grain. He did not measure it carefully like he normally did. He just filled the bucket full. Then he picked up a water barrel that was almost empty. He filled it with water from the well, carrying it slowly, carefully, trying not to spill too much. His hands were not as strong as they used to be, and his back hurt from bending. He walked back out into the evening. The sun had gone down more, and the sky was turning purple and dark blue. In another hour, it would be completely night. The stars would come out. Marcus loved the stars. They reminded him that the world was bigger than his problems, bigger than his loneliness. The wild horse was still there. It had not run away. It had not moved very far from where Marcus had first seen it. The horse was standing in the same place, looking at the ranch, looking at the barn, looking, maybe, at Marcus. Marcus set the bucket down very carefully on the ground. He moved slowly, trying not to make sudden movements that could scare the animal. In all his years working with horses, he had learned that wild animals could be unpredictable. They could be afraid or angry without warning. He had to show this horse that he meant no harm. He had to show it that he wanted to help. The wild horse's ears moved forward. It was watching him. Its dark eyes followed every movement Marcus made. The horse took one step forward, then stopped. Then another step. Then it stopped again. Marcus stayed very still. He did not move toward the horse. He did not try to touch it. He simply stood next to the bucket and the water barrel and waited. Sometimes the best thing to do is nothing but wait. The horse walked forward more bravely now. Its limp was obvious. With each step on its front left leg, the horse seemed to have pain. but it kept coming. The animal was desperate. The hunger was stronger than the fear. Finally, the wild horse reached the bucket. It put its head down and began to eat. The grain disappeared quickly, like the horse had not eaten in days. Maybe it had not. Marcus could see the animal's ribs very clearly now that it was closer. He could count them almost, like lines drawn on its body. This horse had suffered. This horse knew what it meant to be hungry. As the horse ate, Marcus slowly moved toward the water barrel, very slowly, very carefully. He did not want to startle the animal. The horse raised its head for just a moment, watching him, deciding whether to trust him or not. Then it went back to eating. The water was waiting. The wild horse drank like it had never tasted water before. It drank long and hard, and water dripped from its mouth and nose. When it finished, it looked up at Marcus. For the first time, there was something different in its eyes. Not fear, not anger, something softer, something like gratitude. Marcus felt tears coming to his eyes. He did not know why. He was not a man who cried very often. But something about this moment, about this broken animal that had come to him, made his heart feel very full and very sad at the same time. "It is okay," Marcus said softly. His voice was quiet and gentle. "You are safe here. I will not hurt you." The horse did not understand his words, of course. Animals do not understand human language in that way. But they understand tone. They understand kindness. They understand when someone means them no harm. The wild horse seemed to relax a little bit. It took a step closer to Marcus, and then another step. Marcus reached out his hand very slowly. His heart was beating fast. This was a wild horse. It could bite him. It could kick him. It could hurt him badly. But he stretched out his weathered hand anyway, offering it to the animal like a gift.
The horse lowered its head and smelled Marcus's hand. The breath from its nose was warm. Marcus could feel it. The horse smelled like dust and sweat and wild places. It smelled like freedom and survival and struggle. Then the horse did something that surprised Marcus completely. It touched its nose to his palm. Gently. It was like the horse was saying thank you. It was like the horse was telling him something. Something that said, "I see you. I know you helped me. I will remember this." Marcus felt his throat become tight with emotion. He thought about Sarah. He thought about how she would have loved this moment. She would have cried happy tears. She would have said something like, "Marcus, look what happened. Look what you did. You helped something that was broken." The horse stayed close to Marcus now. It did not run away. It did not seem scared anymore. Instead, it seemed like the animal had decided to stay, to trust him, to believe that Marcus was someone who could be trusted. As the night became completely dark, and the stars came out bright and clear above them, Marcus stood with the wild horse. He put his hand on its neck and felt the strong muscles beneath the dirty coat. He could feel the heart beating fast inside the horse's chest. "I do not even know your name," Marcus whispered, "but I will help you. I promise. You will not go hungry. You will not be alone. Not anymore." The horse made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. The two of them stood together in the darkness, a lonely old man and a broken wild horse, two creatures who understood suffering in their own ways, now finding something they both needed. They found hope. The wild horse stayed. That first night, Marcus had worried it would run away when morning came. But when the sun rose over the hills and painted everything golden and pink, the horse was still there. It was standing near the fence, waiting for Marcus. From that day forward, Marcus fell into a new routine. Every morning, even before he did anything else, he would prepare food and water for the wild horse. He would fill the bucket with grain and carry the water barrel out to the fence. The horse would come running now, no longer afraid, no longer hesitant. It would eat and drink while Marcus stood nearby, sometimes talking to it, sometimes just watching. 2 weeks passed, then a month. The horse was changing. The grain and water were bringing life back into its body. The bones were not showing as much. The coat, while still rough and dirty, was becoming smoother and shinier. The limp was getting better too. Marcus could see that the injury to the front leg was healing. The animal was getting stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, Marcus was sitting on the fence, watching the horse eat, when he made a decision. This animal needed a name. It could not just be the wild horse forever. It needed a real name, something that meant something that showed it was special. Marcus thought about the horse's nature. He thought about how it had arrived suddenly, like weather. He thought about how it moved with power and grace, unpredictable but beautiful. He thought about storms he had seen in his life, dangerous and wild but also incredible to watch. "Storm," he said out loud. "Your name is Storm." The horse raised its head when it heard the name. It looked at Marcus with those dark, intelligent eyes. It was as if the horse understood, as if the animal agreed that this was the right name. From that moment on, Marcus called the horse Storm every single day. "Good morning, Storm. How are you today, Storm? Come here, Storm." The horse learned to recognize its name. It would come running when Marcus called. It would follow him from place to place. A bond was forming, something deep and true. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Marcus began taking Storm on short walks around the property. He would lead the horse by a rope, and Storm would follow willingly, no longer pulling away or trying to escape. They would walk through the dry fields together, Marcus talking about his life, talking about Sarah, talking about his dreams and his fears. "You know, Storm," Marcus would say as they walked, "most people in town think I am crazy. They think this land is worthless. They think I should leave like everyone else. But I cannot leave. This is my home. Your home now, too." Storm would walk beside him, listening. The horse could not understand the words, of course, but it seemed to understand the meaning behind them. It seemed to understand that Marcus needed to talk, needed to share his sadness with someone, and Storm was willing to listen. One day, something happened that made Marcus's heart fill with joy. He was in the barn, working on fixing some broken wood on the fence. Storm was standing outside, and Marcus had left the barn door open. When Marcus turned around, he found Storm standing right there beside him, inside the barn. The horse had followed him inside without being asked. It was like Storm wanted to be near Marcus. It was like the horse could not stand to be apart from him, even for a few minutes. Marcus stopped his work and looked at Storm. He put his hand on the horse's neck, and he felt the strong, warm body beneath his palm. He felt the heartbeat. He felt the life in this animal. "You trust me now, do you not?" Marcus whispered. "You came all the way to me, all the way from wherever you came from, and you trusted me with your life." The people in town had mixed feelings about Storm. Some of the old ranchers would come by and shake their heads. "That is a wild horse, Marcus," they would say. "You cannot tame something like that. It will never be safe. It will never be truly yours." But Marcus did not care what they said. He knew something about Storm that they could not see. He understood that this horse was not wild in the way they thought. Storm was wild because it had been hurt and rejected. Storm was wild because the world had not been kind to it. But underneath all of that wildness was a good heart. Underneath all of that fear was a desire to love and be loved. Sometimes in the evening, Marcus would sit outside his small house, and Storm would come and stand next to him. The horse would lower its head, and Marcus would put his arm around its neck. They would stand like that as the sun went down, not needing to speak, not needing to do anything but be together. In those moments, Marcus felt less alone. In those moments, he felt like life might be worth living again. The other horses on the ranch seemed to accept Storm too. At first, they had been cautious, keeping their distance from this strange new animal. But slowly, they began to understand that Storm was not a threat. The horses would stand together in the field, and Storm would be among them, no longer separated, no longer alone. 4 months after Storm arrived, something beautiful happened. Marcus was working in the field one afternoon when he noticed that Storm was no longer limping. The injury had healed completely. The horse was running and playing with the other animals like it had never been hurt at all. It was like watching a miracle. It was like watching something broken become whole again. That night, Marcus sat on his porch with a cup of hot coffee, and he cried. Not sad tears, happy tears. He cried because Storm had come to him when he needed it most. He cried because this broken horse had helped him feel alive again. He cried because he understood now that Sarah had been right. When you help something that is suffering, when you give your heart to something that needs it, everything changes. Storm stood nearby, munching on hay, content and healthy and finally, truly home. Marcus looked up at the stars and smiled for the first time in years. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered. "Thank you for loving like this. Thank you for teaching me to care for broken things." And somewhere in the darkness, Marcus swore he could hear Sarah laughing, happy that her husband had finally found a reason to smile again. The drought came back that year. But it came back different. It came back worse than anyone had ever seen before. The first sign was when the well began to run dry. Marcus noticed it in late summer. The water that had always come up from deep in the earth, cold and clear and steady, began to slow down. First it was just a little slower. Then it was very slow. Then one morning, when Marcus went to pull water for Storm and the other animals, nothing came up but dust. He tried again. He pulled the rope down deep, deeper than ever before, but the bucket came up empty. Empty and dry and dusty. Marcus felt fear into his chest like a heavy stone. The news from town was even worse. The well at the general store had gone completely dry. The river that had been a thin trickle before was now completely empty. There was no water anywhere. Families were packing their wagons again, leaving their homes and their land. The county was dying of thirst. Farmers were desperate. They were selling their animals at any price, even giving them away, because they could not afford to feed them without water. The schoolhouse closed because there was no water for the children to drink. The church held prayer meetings every day, asking God to send rain. But no rain came. Marcus had saved a little money over the years, but he knew it would not be enough. He could buy water from the city, transport it in large barrels on wagons, but the price was very high. One barrel of water cost more than he could afford. He had maybe enough money to buy water for 1 month, maybe 2. After that, he did not know what he would do. He had 3 cows left. He had Storm and 2 other horses. He had some chickens. All of them needed water to survive. Without water, they would all die. And if the animals died, there was nothing left for Marcus. There was no reason to stay on the land anymore. 3 days into the worst of the drought, Marcus sat on his porch and thought about giving up. He thought about selling his land to the company from the city. He thought about leaving, like everyone else had done. He thought about driving into town and finding work in some factory or some shop. He thought about leaving everything his family had built behind. He was so tired, so very tired. That morning, something strange happened. Marcus was sitting inside his house, too sad and too tired to even go outside, when he heard a noise. It was a sound he recognized. It was Storm's voice. The horse was making a sound that Marcus had never heard before. It was like a call, urgent and loud and insistent. Marcus got up slowly and walked to the door. Storm was outside, and the horse was behaving very strangely. It was running back and forth, from one direction to another. It would come close to Marcus, then run away, then come back again. It was like the horse was trying to tell him something. It was like Storm was desperate for Marcus to understand. "What is wrong, Storm?" Marcus asked. "What do you need?" Storm ran away from the house, toward the back of the property, toward a part of the land that Marcus had not visited in many months. It was too far to walk with the drought, too far to check on when everything else needed his attention. Marcus had forgotten about that part of his property, the part way out past the dried-up fields. Storm kept calling, kept insisting, kept running back to Marcus and then running away again. Something inside Marcus told him to follow. Something told him that Storm was trying to help him, trying to show him something important. Marcus got a shovel from the barn. He did not know why. He just knew that he needed it. Then he followed Storm across the dry fields. The ground was hard, baked by the sun until it was almost like stone. It cracked beneath Marcus's feet. There were no plants, no grass, nothing growing. Just endless, empty earth that wanted nothing but had everything taken from it. Storm walked ahead, moving faster now, more excited. The horse was leading him to a place that Marcus could barely remember. It was where an old shed had been, years and years ago, back when the property was fuller and greener. The shed had fallen down long ago. Marcus had forgotten it even existed. Storm stopped at a particular spot and began to dig with its hooves. The horse was frantic, digging and scraping at the earth, throwing dirt behind it. The animal was wild with purpose. Marcus stepped forward and began to dig with his shovel. He did not understand why. He just felt like he had to. His old arms worked harder than they had in years. Sweat dripped down his face. His back hurt. But he kept digging. Down 2 feet. Nothing but dry earth. Down 4 feet. Still nothing. Down 6 feet. Marcus was getting tired. He was beginning to think this was foolish, that Storm had been confused about something, that there was nothing here. Down 8 feet. Then something changed. The soil became cooler, damper. It felt different under the shovel. Down 10 feet. Marcus heard a sound. A beautiful sound. The sound of water trickling. Down 12 feet. Water appeared. Clear, cold water, coming up from deep in the earth. A spring. A hidden spring that had been there all along, forgotten, waiting. The water pooled at the bottom of the hole, pure and clean and precious beyond anything Marcus had ever imagined. Marcus fell to his knees. He could not believe what he was seeing. He put his hand in the water and felt its coolness. He brought it to his lips and tasted it. It was real. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever experienced. Storm stood above him, looking down, breathing hard from the work of digging. The horse had known. Somehow, in a way that Marcus could not explain, Storm had known that water was there. Storm had felt it or sensed it or remembered it from some time before, and the horse had come to Marcus to help him find it. Marcus looked up at the horse with tears streaming down his face. "You saved us," he whispered. "You saved everything. You saved me." He climbed out of the hole and wrapped his arms around Storm's neck. The horse was trembling, either from the hard work of digging or from emotion. Marcus could not tell. But the bond between them, the thing that had been forming all those months, became complete in that moment. It became absolute and unbreakable. By the next morning, news had spread through town. Marcus had water, real water, from a real spring on his property. Neighbors came to ask for help. Marcus shared the water. He helped dig new wells on their property, hoping to find springs like the one Storm had found. Some of them did. Some of the other farmers found water too. The county began to survive again. And it was all because a wild horse had known where to dig. 6 months had passed since the day Storm found the water. The entire county had changed. Families who had packed their wagons and left were coming back. They came back slowly at first, careful and unsure. But they came back. They came back because they had heard the stories. They came back because they had hope again. The story of how a wild horse found water in the dry earth had spread far beyond the small town. Newspapers sent reporters to write about it. People came from neighboring counties to see the spring for themselves and to see the horse that had found it. They wanted to touch Storm, to feel the animal that had done something so impossible, so miraculous. But Marcus kept Storm away from most of the visitors. He was protective of the horse now. He understood that Storm was special, that the world wanted to use the horse and take it away. So Marcus built a fence around a large part of his property, a safe place where Storm could be free from too much attention. The truth was, Marcus did not need the attention anymore. He did not need to prove anything to anyone. He was too busy with his new life. The farm was growing again. With steady water from the spring, Marcus had planted crops. Real crops, not the dry dust that had covered his fields before. Green things were growing now. Corn and beans and vegetables. The earth was alive again because it had water. He had bought more animals too. More horses, more cows, more chickens. He had hired a young man named Thomas to help him with the work. Thomas was strong and kind, and he loved Storm as much as Marcus did. Together, the three of them worked the land and made it beautiful again. But the most important change was in Marcus himself. The sadness that had lived in his heart for so long was still there. It would always be there, because Sarah was gone and nothing could change that. But it was different now. It was not a sadness that crushed him anymore. It was a sadness that reminded him of love. It was a sadness that made him understand other people's pain. It was a sadness that made him want to help. One afternoon, a woman came to the ranch. She was driving an old wagon. and she had a thin, sick horse in the back. The animal was barely standing. It looked like it was close to death. The woman's name was Ellen, and she was a widow like Marcus had almost become. Her husband had died, and she had tried to keep the ranch going alone, but she could not. She had sold most of her animals. This last horse, she could not sell because nobody wanted a sick animal. She had come to Marcus because she had heard what he had done for Storm. "Can you help her?" Ellen asked, her voice shaking with hope and desperation. "Can you help my horse like you helped that wild horse?" Marcus looked at the sick animal and knew immediately what he had to do. He brought the horse to the barn. He gave it water and food. He cleaned it and tended to its wounds. He talked to it like he talked to Storm, with gentleness and patience and love. Within 2 months, that horse was healthy and strong. Ellen cried when she saw her animal standing tall again. She cried happy tears, and Marcus understood because he had cried the same tears when Storm had been healed. "How can I ever thank you?" Ellen asked. "You do not need to thank me," Marcus said. "You just need to remember. Remember that broken things can become whole again. Remember that patience and love can heal almost anything. And if you see something else that is broken, help it too. That is how you thank me." Word spread even more after that. People started bringing Marcus animals that were sick or hurt or broken. Some were horses, some were cows, some were dogs. Marcus helped all of them. He did not ask for money. He just asked that they help other broken things when they could. His ranch became something different than it had been before. It was no longer just a place to raise animals for profit. It became a place of healing. It became a sanctuary for the broken and the forgotten and the unwanted. 1 year after Storm found the water, the town held a celebration. It was the biggest celebration the county had seen in many years. There were food and music and dancing. They declared it Water Day, a holiday to remember the year of the great drought and how they had survived it. And they gave Storm a special honor. The mayor came to Marcus's ranch and presented Storm with a medal. It was a simple medal, but it was made of real gold. On it was written, "For saving our county, for showing us that what others call worthless can be most valuable." Marcus held the medal in his hand and cried. Not sad tears, happy tears. He thought about all the people who had called Storm worthless. All the people who had said that a wild horse was dangerous and useless. All the people who wanted Marcus to get rid of it. But Storm had shown them all something true. Storm had shown them that you cannot judge something by how it looks or where it comes from. You cannot decide something is worthless just because other people have rejected it. Sometimes the most valuable things come from the wildest, most unexpected places. That night, Marcus sat on his porch with Storm beside him, like they had done so many times before. The stars were bright and clear above them. The wind was cool and gentle. "You came to me when I needed you most," Marcus said to the horse. "I was ready to give up on everything. I was ready to leave this land, to leave my home, to give up on life. But you came, and you showed me that there was still hope. You showed me that I could still love something. You showed me that I still had a purpose." Storm lowered its head and rested it against Marcus's chest. Marcus could feel the horse's heartbeat, strong and steady and alive. "And now look at us," Marcus continued. "Look at what we have built together. Look at all the animals we have helped. Look at all the people whose lives have changed because we found each other." Marcus thought about Sarah. He thought about how she had always believed in helping broken things. He thought about how she would have loved this, loved seeing him happy again, loved seeing him make a difference in the world. "I think Sarah would be proud," Marcus whispered. "I think she would say that we did good work. I think she would say that her broken heart helped me understand Storm's broken heart, and together we became whole." Storm made a soft sound, almost like agreement. The ranch had a new purpose now. It was a place of healing and hope. And at the center of it all was an old man and a wild horse who had found each other in the darkness and brought light back to their whole world. This is how broken things become beautiful. This is how loss becomes meaning. This is how a lonely man and a wild horse saved not just themselves, but an entire community. And it all started with one simple act of kindness on a dry evening, when Marcus decided to help something that was suffering, and Storm decided to trust him. Some stories do not have endings. They just have new beginnings.